The last time you got a cold, you had a pretty good idea of what was going on, right? A virus, your immune system fighting back, the whole deal. But for almost all of human history, getting sick was just this terrifying mystery. There was no logic, no explanation. So where do you even begin to investigate something like that?
Well, for centuries, the answer wasn't in our world at all. It was somewhere up in the heavens. People thought disease was a punishment from the gods, or maybe the work of some evil spirit. It took one incredibly brave thinker to say, hey, wait a minute, what if we're looking in the wrong place?
So, this is where a guy named Hippocrates steps onto the scene, more than 2,000 years ago. And he asks this question that was, honestly, totally radical for its time. What if getting sick has nothing to do with the gods? What if it's about the world around us? You know, the air we're breathing, the water we drink, the places we live.
And that right there, that was the moment. The first detective on the scene basically declared, this isn't a ghost story, people. This is a crime scene, and there's a physical cause. That simple but massive shift in thinking from supernatural to natural was the first real break in the case. The investigation could finally, actually begin.
Okay, so if the cause is out there in the world, how in the world do you find it? Well, the next generation of detectives found their best tool in a really unlikely place. Stacks and stacks of old paper records.
Flash forward to the 1600s. There's this man, John Grount, and he has this brilliant idea. He starts looking at these things called London's Bills of Mortality. They were basically just weekly lists of who died, and he realizes, these aren't just names, this is data. This is a treasure trove of clues. Before this, these records were just a sad list of names. But by organizing them into tables like this, Grant, and later a guy named William Farr, could suddenly see things no one had ever seen before. Patterns. They could start asking real questions. Is there a fever season? Does the plague hit one part of town harder than another? All of a sudden, the city's death records weren't just a ledger. They were a map of the crime scene. And this new, data-driven approach set the stage for probably the most famous detective story in all of public health. A massive showdown in 19th century London that changed absolutely everything.
So, at the time, you have to understand, everybody believed in something called the miasma theory. The idea was that diseases like cholera were caused by bad air, basically foul smells. But one physician, Dr. John Snow, he just wasn't buying it. He had a hunch the real culprit wasn't in the air at all. It was in the water.
Then in 1854, a horrifying cholera outbreak just paralyzes the Soho district of London. Everyone else is literally closing their windows, trying to keep out the bad smells. But Dr. Snow, the man who'd become the father of modern epidemiology, he grabs his notebook and marches right into the middle of the chaos. He was going to prove his case. And his method was just pure, brilliant detective work. He didn't just guess. He followed the evidence. First, he went door to door and put a dot on a map for every single death. Then, he looked at the map, and the pattern just jumped out at him. The deaths weren't random at all. They were all clustered around one spot, a public water pump on Broad Street. Armed with this map, this visual proof, he convinced the local officials to do something really simple. Take the handle off the pump. And just like that, the outbreak sputtered to a halt. He'd found the murder weapon.
So Snow proved how a disease could spread. That was huge. But the next big question was still hanging out there. What was the actual killer agent in the water? For that answer, the investigation had to move from the streets into the lab.
And the answer came from a German physician named Robert Koch. His work with microscopes finally put a face to the invisible enemy. He established what we now call germ theory, proving that tiny living things, bacteria, were the real culprits responsible for specific diseases.
And Koch, he didn't just say, hey, trust me. He created this super rigorous 4-step checklist for proving it. These rules, known as Koch's postulates, became the gold standard for any detective trying to prove that this specific germ causes this specific disease. It was like the official rulebook for identifying the bad guy, and it's a foundation we still use today.
And it wasn't just Snow and Koch working in a vacuum. I mean, the whole field was just exploding with breakthroughs. You had other detectives realizing the culprit isn't always a germ. Percival Pott linked cancer to the soot that covered chimney sweeps. Others were focused on solutions. James Lynn ran the very first clinical trial and proved citrus fruits could cure scurvy. Ignaz Semmelweis showed that just simple hand washing could stop a deadly fever in hospitals. And then, of course, Alexander Fleming discovers penicillin, which gave these detectives not just clues, but an actual weapon.
So, all of this incredible work by these pioneers, it laid the foundation for the disease detectives of today. The core mission, the why we do it, that hasn't changed. But the tools? Oh yeah, the tools have definitely gotten an upgrade.
Today's detectives still use John Snow's map, but now it's a geographic information system, a GIS, powered by satellite data. They're still looking for patterns like John Grunt, but they're using AI and machine learning that can spot trends in billions of data points in seconds. And the investigation itself has gotten so much broader. We're now looking at things called social determinants of health, which is just a way of saying that sometimes your income, your zip code, or your education can be just as important to your health as any germ.
And the result is that the field has branched out like crazy. Yeah, hunting down infectious outbreaks is still a huge part of the job, but today's disease detectives are just as likely to be investigating the root causes of heart disease, or the link between air pollution and asthma, or the reasons for a spike in diabetes. The mystery isn't just what makes people sick anymore, it's what actually creates health in a community.